We are in week 2 of our Lament series, and my name is Katie, and I'm a member of the teaching team here, and I am going to have the pleasure this morning of talking to some educators and having them share some of their experiences and their perspectives over the last couple years of the pandemic. And so I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about lament and highlight a few things that Jay mentioned last week, because a few things really stood out to me. So one of those, to just kind of start it off, that lament is this expression of pain or sorrow or grief. And I think it's important that today we're going to be focusing a little bit on that expressive part of actually having a space to share it. Last week, Jay asked a question of who are we now in kind of the context of how this last year of the pandemic or the last couple years of the pandemic have changed us and impacted us. And he asked some really meaningful questions about the church and how those things have impacted the church. And I think it's important that as we listen to the educators today, we reflect for ourselves as well, how have we been changed? If we are aware of it or not, we are different because of the pandemic, right? The world around us is different. I mean, just the fact that I'm wearing a mask, which I could probably take off, and you're all wearing masks. The fact that we have Zoom meetings regularly now, that was a thing before, but now it's like, I'll just jump on Zoom. There are so many changes, and those are superficial, the lighthearted ones, right? There's a lot deeper impacts of the pandemic in all of us. One of the things that Jay also said that really struck me, he said, pain can only heal when it can breathe. And even this morning during our time of worship, I was reminded that we don't take time to breathe. I mean, we do, because we're all here. But to let our souls breathe, our society doesn't like that. It's uncomfortable, because when you take time to breathe, you realize things. And it's easier to keep this fast-paced, move from one to the other, keep ourselves busy, keep ourselves distracted, and that when we take time to breathe, and we let our pain breathe, it's very uncomfortable. And I've had a lot of conversations lately about living in tension, and it's just easier to avoid or to get a clear answer, right? When someone shares a problem, it's easy to be like, this is what you should do. It's hard to say, like, I don't know, and I'm going to sit with you, and it's going to feel painful. We don't want to feel pain, right? And so this morning and in the next couple weeks, as we have these panels, I want to really challenge us to focus, to be present, to listen, and to sit with the pain of the panelists and sit with the pain that it might stir up in you. And to give that space for the pain to breathe, because that leads to healing. And that's what God calls us to be. He calls us to be people that are healed and are calling other people into healing. Because then we can live out the fullness of who He's created us to be. So we don't want to just sit in pain to sit there. We want to sit in pain so that we can experience God's love, God's healing, and then we can call other people to that fullness. And I think that our church community here at One Life, we have a unique opportunity to do this. Because from where I'm standing, I can make eye contact with all of you. There aren't people 100 feet away up in some balcony. You don't need to look at me on a Jumbotron to see me. And so when these panelists share, you might not know them or know their names, but they're very close to you. And when service is over, you have the opportunity to go talk to them, to reach out to them. We have a community that can sit and help each other breathe through our pain in a unique way. And I think that that's something, that's one of the reasons I'm here, because we can do that together. And I want to challenge us to do that, to listen, to be present, and to encourage each other to lament. I know from personal experience, it's so much easier, like I said, to give solutions, right? Or to do the like, well, at least whatever, but to sit there and encourage people, I think you've had a hard time. I think you need to talk about it and to give that space, because it's so easy to want to just help people push through, right? Partly because we don't want to deal with their pain, because then that might bring up pain in me, and it would be easier to ignore it. But sometimes I think we need people in our lives to encourage us to share that. And that's what that lament is, that it's expression of that pain. I work a lot with children, and it's so easy, right, when a child is crying to just say, like, you're okay. Like, stop crying. They just took your truck. There's 15 other trucks. Like, don't worry about it, right? And there's an appropriate time to encourage children to move on. But there's also something about, like, that's upsetting, right? And we just want to say, like, it's okay, move on. But sometimes we need to say, do you want to cry? Do you want a hug? Tell me you're mad. But that starts so young, this temptation to, like, you're okay, because I don't have time to deal with your pain, so just move on. And so this morning, I want to really encourage us to hear, to listen, to sit in this. Yesterday, I had the privilege of attending a brunch where a woman shared her story of living through domestic violence. And it was the first time that she had publicly shared that story to a group of people. And she experienced, you could see it as she was sharing, this freedom in having people hear her story and recognize she's in a different place now, and to have people be present with her in that. And when we were singing that first song, We'll All Be Free, I was thinking, man, there's something to this sharing our pain that allows us to move closer to that freedom. And society tells us not to share our pain, right? It's kind of, like I said, we don't want to experience it. And there's so many reasons, because pain brings fear. What's going to happen? How are people going to respond? It's shame. What if I contributed to this pain? Somehow I'm bad because of that. This being viewed as weak, feeling like people will think I'm weak. Or I've personally experienced, if I start sharing this, everything's going to fall apart, and I'm going to fall apart. And someone said to me once, well, then maybe you need to fall apart, you know? Or like, what does that even, like, what do you think that's going to mean? Like, it's okay to share these things. But again, there's so many reasons why we fight it. So this morning, as our educators share, I want us to tune into those things. And I also really encourage us to be aware of how God is going to be stirring in you, maybe some areas that you need to lament. And as we hear from peacemakers and healthcare workers in the future, be listening for ways, even though you might not be a teacher or a healthcare worker, there's something that you can probably connect to in these stories. So with that, I'm going to bring up the three educators from our church that are going to share with us. So Julia and Shirley and Tanya, if you'd come on up. Woo! And thank you for clapping for them, because they took time and energy, and they are literally sitting in front of you sharing their story, right? And that takes vulnerability, and it takes strength and bravery to be willing to share things and be heard. And for some of us, just speaking in front of people is a huge sacrifice, right? And so we really do want to honor them. So I'm going to have you start by just introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit about what age group or subject you have taught or currently are teaching. So Shirley, we'll start with you.
Well, my name is Shirley, and so the past 2 years I've been teaching fourth grade. So, I got my teaching credential quite a while ago, maybe 12 years, and since that time I've been substitute teaching or teaching and just trying to secure a permanent position. But yeah, I've taught pretty much anywhere from kinder to sixth grade, and so. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, thanks.
Hello. Okay. My name is Tanya, and I've been teaching since 2006. So it's been quite a while. And my grade level that I'm kind of in is the very young one. So I've taught kinder, first grade, second grade, but I've done TK most of my career. If you're familiar with TK, it's called transitional kindergarten. So it's the little ones.
Yeah, and I'm Julia. I also worked in elementary school age kids, so like kindergarten through sixth grade music.
Awesome, music, yeah, great. And then Tanya, if you would take this first question, and you know, we do have a time limit, but how has teaching in COVID and the pandemic, how has that impacted your teaching?
Yeah, when this question came up when because we got the questions ahead of time, I was like, wait, COVID teaching, it's been 3 seasons, right, since it started. So when it first I remember 2 years ago, March, it was like things were crazy, right? Just so much unknown. And we were just really, just one day we were open and the next day we were closed. Pretty much it felt like that, right? And so with a lot of fear, a lot of unknown, a lot of scrambling and trying to do the right thing. So that was just, yeah, trying to like head above water for the end of the school year. So that was really rough. And the second year, full school year, was difficult in its own way. With my little ones, we did Zoom. I did Zoom for most of the year, but we had 7 different schedules throughout the whole year. So it was a lot of up and down, a lot of back and forth. So that was definitely challenging. And this school year is also different, but we're still in pandemic, so it's in person yet with masks. Now masks are a little bit lifted, but it's still not the same, but I would say it is better. And I would say for the parents as well, like being able to send their children, if they're comfortable. So, but each one was so different, and so it's definitely looking back and even looking at the present, like wow, it's usually teaching. We would say like there's never a dull moment, but you can't even say that. Now it's like oh my gosh, like you never know what's going to happen. So, yeah.
If you notice there, she said 1 year she had 7 different schedules. And those of you that are parents, you're like, oh yeah, I remember those 7 different schedules, right? But that's a lot. Like teaching pre-pandemic is like a lot, right? And then with those 7 different schedules took planning and adjusting, and the email that said we're starting that tomorrow or next Monday or whatever it was, right? So that constant changing. And Zoom, you can imagine if you haven't been around 4 or 5-year-olds for a while, but Zoom with 4 and 5-year-olds, And then also with the older kids, there's a different challenge when you have, middle school, high schoolers who might not show, and they know all the tricks, right, of how to work the system. Shirley or Julia, do you have anything you want to add to that? Because I know we have different age groups represented, how teaching in the pandemic kind of changed for you.
Yeah, they're just very different experiences. I think last year, when we were virtual and teaching online, that was really a challenge. Like I tried to block this out, but, but basically, I think it was just very challenging and discouraging because I had like half of my kids were not turning their assignments, and I would try to get in touch with their parents, and the parents weren't following through, and so I got very frustrated and discouraged, and I just kind of gave up communicating with some of the parents, like probably by December, January, and so I think that it was very discouraging for me, and I became kind of bitter and and whatnot, and I think very cynical and judgmental. I think, and then during that time, I do kind of wish I had been more understanding. Like you knew it was difficult for the kids, but at the same time you forget to empathize and be understanding. But this school year has been a lot better, I think, in person. You just get to build more of a personal relationship with the kids, and and really get to. I'm sorry, this is not. Oh, sorry. Okay, and you get to build more of a personal relationship with the kids, and really get to encourage them and just be able to work with them even on an academic level and just see a lot of their progress. So it's just very different experiences, the past 2 years. Yeah.
Really different from online versus in person for teaching. Something that we've really appreciated is being able to be in person with students, and just the value of walking with people in person rather than over through a screen. And so it's just it's been one of the parts of teaching that have been most valuable, is just also building those relationships with students.
Yeah. And that's something that I think as educators, and a lot of us in areas of our life, but we lost that connection, right? And Shirley, you were teaching 4th grade, right? So when you have a 4th grader and you're able to talk to them and see them and you get a better sense of what's going on, but when they just don't show up on Zoom or they don't turn in their assignments, that ability to connect. And it makes sense that it was harder to be empathetic. It's harder to be empathetic with a computer screen, right? Or a little box that says, maybe this person's there, you know? I had forgotten, because it seems so long ago, but I was teaching a year ago college students. And, you know, sometimes we do activities and they'd be in breakout rooms, and then, you know, I'd be like sign off and the person's still on for like 10 minutes, you know? Something tells me they weren't there because they don't know class is over. And so those older ages, you know, you lose that ability to look someone in the eye and say, I need you to, you know, what's going on. And it's harder for kids to share what's going on to a teacher that's a box as well, you know? And so I think some of those things were huge losses during that time. That leads into this next question of what areas do you feel like you were able to lament during this past year or two? Or where are there areas where you feel like you still need to lament?
I'll go first. I think that one thing I have kind of already lamented a little bit, but would like to lament more is just like, it was my first year teaching, just like being online and not really seeing students in person, not seeing students bottom half of their faces. I can't tell if they're frowning or smiling at me. And like just the kind of emotional stress that it took to keep changing through different scenarios has been like, is this what teaching is? I don't really know if it's a place I can really serve people, if I'm dealing with all of these like external things in the world. So.
Yeah, and I think in the conversation we had earlier this week, you shared about that disappointment of finishing a program, graduating with a credential, starting teaching, and this being the experience that you had, and that disappointment. And like you said, is this what I want to do? Is this what teaching is? You know, and how can I love and serve students in this context? Yeah. Anything else, areas that you were able to lament, or things you wish or feel like you still need to?
Yeah, I feel like I just have so many regrets. I mean, you don't think about it at the time, but I just wish I had been more like cheerful and encouraging with my students last year. I think I got so negative. And, you know, just being back in the classroom this year, I just see like just how, so I wish in retrospect, like I had thought more about their emotional health, you know, and their well-being, instead of just focusing so much on academics. I think I felt so stressed out because we had, like you said, we had to we not only had to learn a new platform on how to teach, you know, online and converting everything to online curriculum, but it's also keeping track of their attendance and whether they were online and offline, and having to report to the office, like whether they were, because they'd have to contact the parents, and then to see if monitor the computer screens to see if they were online, you know, if they were on the right, where they're supposed to be, and all this and that, and just trying to, and looking at so many different screens, and then the technology wouldn't work where I couldn't see all the kids. Just so many things. And I was also getting evaluated by my principal, like she was studying, you know, this year, and, you know, having to observe my lessons and things, and it was just a tough year. So I think I kind of got very, it was just frustrating. And so, and then not having the class be so, like, responsive. But, you know, now this year, I just wish, you know, seeing it's a different crop of students, but I just wish that I had been more, more encouraging and more cheerful and just more positive with them, because I think that last year of learning, it was pretty much lost, you know, so I wish I had just offered a lot more kindness and like empathy and compassion for them, I think.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to, I think when we shared, I said, wow, I haven't given myself space to lament, and I think part of it's my personality, parts, you know, I'm a 7, so I'm like, I like to avoid conflict, avoid pain, but also, you know, when you're given, you know, as teachers, whatever you're given, you're going to do the best you can with, right? And you're going to adapt, and you're going to, or as for me, it's like, I'm going to make it work. Like 7 schedules, I'm going to do it. You know, like I have so many different versions of my lesson plan, like lesson plan virtual, lesson plan hybrid, lesson plan AM, PM. Like it was Google was my best friend, you know, but it was a lot, right? But I think for me, it was, I got to do this for the kids. You know, I got to do this for the parents. And like it just has to be done. I don't know, yeah, even when we had the breaks, like, okay, you know, I wasn't teaching 24/7, 365 days a year, but once we hit that break, it's like out of sight, out of mind. You're like, I'm taking the break, and I'm not even gonna think about it. And so, because you kind of think like, well, you know, could you lament during your break? I mean, no, because I'm not even thinking about school. It's like, once the last day of school hit, I'm out of there, you know. So, but when I'm in it like 100%, right? So, thinking about, I know the experience is so different with we were talking about like the age group. With my group of kids, like I think I shared last time that I was up here, like that partnership with the parents is so important. And that was the first year I actually felt more connected to parents because I was in their homes, like virtually, you know, and I got to meet a lot of siblings, parents, pets, you know, like I met to meet all their, like I was in their homes, you know, and so there was that, it wasn't like in-person connection, but it was definitely a type of relationship connection. And, you know, the work that they're producing was either live with me or their parents had helped them. So they really couldn't get away with not showing up, you know, without me like, hey, what's going on? But so what I'm kind of lamenting this year, even though it's more close to what used to be, I don't have that same kind of accountability connection. And I'm feeling a little bit like I kind of miss that. Not that I do not want to be on Zoom in their homes. You know, I don't miss that part, but I miss that kind of like dependence. Does that sound bad? Codependence? That sounds bad, right?
Co-parenting. I think is what you said.
Like not codependency, but that teamwork aspect. So because a lot of it is now like, oh, my kids are back in school, it's all on you again. It's like, no, it starts at home, you know, so yeah.
I think something that stood out to me previously, and as Tanya was sharing right now, is that you hear the heart of a teacher of like, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to do it for the kids. And so that there's no space for lamenting, right? Because again, part of that is if I take time to really think about this, like I'm probably not going to keep going, right? Like I got to just go. And that I think is, again, a common experience that we can all probably relate to at different times or in different professions where there's too much to actually stop and lament. But again, if we don't do that at some point, which is part of this space, right? Asking her that question and saying, wait, think about it, right? And we want to hear it because it's hard. And even though she might sound so confident in it, that still takes a toll, right? And being able to do that and have children at home and all the different roles that teachers wear in their lives, but as teachers, right? Trying to take on, as Shirley said too, the reason she's discouraged and frustrated is because she cares about these kids and is what is happening and I can't help, right? And teachers do not just teach math and English, right? They're trying to invest in these children. And when you're being an administrator and a tech coach and all these things at once, it's exhausting, right? It's exhausting. A couple more questions here. Were there any specific ways where you felt like God met you in these challenges and where you saw God's presence with you?
I guess, well, I mean, even though virtual teaching was challenging, there were just some blessings because, you know, since we were teaching online, I was able to go home, go to visit my parents in Michigan, and I originally was going to stay there for about a month, but then my principal said we're not going back for a while, so I just stayed with my parents for almost 3 months, and so it was nice to do that. And you know, I would go into my dad's office and you know teach, and then I'd come out. My mom would prepare a nice meal for me, so it was nice. And, so yeah, it was yeah. So that was a blessing. And then you know, as hard as teaching was, I learned a new skill set. You know, it wasn't something I was anticipating, but you know, I learned about more resources, and those are things that I can incorporate into my teaching today. And you know, we just use that. So yeah, I think there were just some of those blessings. And then just this year, after having such a bad year last year, you know, this year I think, I don't know, God just showed some favor on me because I have such a great class this year. They're just so sweet. They're just the sweetest class. I mean, we're going to only have maybe 2 more months left of school. I miss them already, you know. So Yeah, they're just so great, and I think they've helped me feel more positive, about teaching. I think I always struggle with feeling like I'm falling short as a teacher all the time. Like, every day I'm like failing, and so, with these kids, they're just so, they were very low academically because they lost so much last year, and they were probably kind of low to begin with, because I work at a Title I school, so which means, that it's more, I'm working in a community that's more underserved, but our school is not like worst of the worst, it's just more of a working class neighborhood, and, we do have some extreme cases, of kids who are coming from more desperate situations, but, overall, yeah, but there are definitely some challenges, and so, but these kids, even though they were just behind academically, they've been, willing to put in the work and things like that, and just made me kind of revive or kind of renew like my, and I don't know if it's a passion, but I guess for teaching, and so that's been a real blessing for me. And then I think it just also reminded me like, all that I have kids in my class that have improved a lot, or just I have one boy in my class, he's very just struggles academically, but this year for some reason he just started to get, like, my kids, they didn't know their multiplication facts, so we had to work on that on top of like just learning the math itself, and so they didn't have a lot of basic math skills, so he's been just somehow, he just got very motivated and started learning his multiplication facts, and he's one of the best ones in our class doing that. And I mean, he started attending math tutoring with me, and he, his scores used to be like in the 50s, and he went to 70s. Last test he got was like 100%, and I was just, so it's just, and it's just with and then he also met some reading goals and things, and it just, that made me also lament, like, just with a little bit of encouragement, and just cheerleading, and just when you see that the kids just experience just a little bit of success, and how that drives them to move forward, it just made, just kind of reminded me, or just said, for me to just really have to be more encouraging with my students, and to really be their cheerleader, and just to have like, and encourage them in the really small victories, because that leads to greater ones for them. And I think that was like part of my lament too, just because I feel like, oh gosh, I didn't do that last year, I didn't do that as much as I should have. And so, yeah, so I think just this year, I think, yeah, God definitely, met me, in that. And I think just this year has been more of a year, I guess, refreshing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, mm-hmm. Good. And I feel like, I think you maybe couldn't have encouraged your kids as much in the same way, right? Instead of you should have done more, like it was just, you couldn't in the same way because of what the pandemic did to teaching. Well, for our final question this morning, I just want to hear if there are ways, what the ways are that our church community can pray and support you as you continue to process the last couple years, and as you move forward in the day-to-day of your teaching and ministering to families. Julia, do you want to start off with this one?
I think one thing would just be like encouraging our identity and belonging and purpose, like as a teacher and just as a human as well. So yeah, just kind of that kind of like, I think our small group has done a really great job of this too. It's like checking in with how you're doing with all of this unique, like parts of being a teacher in the pandemic.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, moving forward, I mean, the school year's not over yet, but I'm already kind of thinking of like the future. I don't know how many people have like children, young children, but what's coming up in the state, just a FYI, is UTK, which is Universal Transitional Kindergarten. Basically, the age group that I've been doing for a long time, they're 4 years old coming in, and they're turning 5 by December. But what's coming up in our district decided to hop on board early, hop on the train early, and bringing us along is we're taking 4-year-olds. So my position is pretty much going to be, I'm kind of transitioned to almost a preschool teacher. So I might different too.
Yeah.
A little bit. But I mean, I feel like I have the experience with the young ones, but not quite. I mean, I have my own preschoolers, right? It's very different. So just moving forward, I ask for, I guess, prayer for, extra dose of patience, wisdom, and just relying. I was thinking about this, one of the worship song this morning, like, faithful you will be and faithful you have been and faithful you'll be. Like, I think that's my whole kind of the ebbs and flows of my whole career. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and even prior pandemic, there was like a lot of stuff going on. And, but God has always been faithful. So for me to remind myself of that, no matter what happens or what comes thrown at you as an educator, with politics or classroom and all that, different dynamics, pandemic, that God is always faithful. And so he will like guide me. So.
Well, I guess I would just like to take this time to thank our church, because I know that like our leadership especially has been really concerned for the well-being of our church members. And I've been kind of MIA at times, but they always want to check in, and they just want to they care about our mental health, and they're always talking about they always acknowledge like teachers, healthcare workers, and everybody else. And so I just appreciate that. I mean, sometimes I feel like, I don't really deserve that kind of attention, because I feel like, I know that there are healthcare workers out there, and they're dealing more with life and death and having to comfort people, in those situations, and family members. And, I'm not dealing with life and death, but it was frustrating. But still our leadership and our church members, have always like saying, it must be so tough to be a teacher, and this. And I'm like, yeah, but they just care. And then I think also my life group, especially the women in our life group, they've been so supportive. Like, we have a group text, right? And anytime anybody needs like a prayer, it has a prayer request or has to share any praises or just, or just prayer requests, everybody is so supportive. I just recently got some news. I guess this will be a prayer request later, but and I just needed some comfort at that time. I was kind of bummed, and so I just said, guys, can you pray for me, and explain the situation? And then I just got a whole flood of texts, just saying, you're awesome, da da da, and I just felt so just loved and cared for at that time, and I got that comfort that I just needed at that time. So our church has been just amazing. Yeah.
Well, I hope that you can hear that and receive that, because I think, again, like I said in the beginning, that's an opportunity that we have as a church to reach out and to hear the stories. And if you think of it, to pray for the news that Shirley didn't elaborate on, and to ask Tanya, what do you mean about Universal TK, and how can I really support you with that? And in a serious way, like it's things that affect us all, because children grow up, right? And we have lots of babies and young ones in this church that will be there, and asking about new job situations and how people are doing, to really take that time to listen, because we can do that. So thank you so much. Before you take your seats, I would like to pray for you. So if you would join me in praying for these educators. God, I thank you for this morning and for the opportunity to hear from these three women. And I thank you for them and for the other educators that we have here in our community that we didn't hear from this morning, and for the tireless effort that they have put in, not just to educate children, but to love them and to care for them, to reach out to families and to adjust to changing requirements and guidance from administrators and healthcare experts. I thank you for the ways that you have given them the strength to persevere, for the changes that this year have brought in positive ways. I pray that you would continue to meet each one of them in their unique challenges and situations, that you would bless the children in their classrooms, that you would give all of the educators opportunities to show your love and your joy to children and their families. You have placed them in specific schools and classrooms and in specific families' lives, and I pray that you would really use that opportunity to call out the healing and the life that you offer to all of us. So I thank you for this church community and the way that we value educators and voices, that we were able to hear from different people and give them a space to share their lives with us. So I thank you for the life that you give, the the challenge and the privilege that you call us to enter into each other's pain, and to bring each other along in our journeys of healing, as we look to you for that grace and strength. So I pray that you would encourage all of us this morning and give us those spaces to let our pain breathe, so that you can meet us there and we can receive your healing. Thank you for your love. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much, panelists.